After years of quietly enduring the iron grip of our neighborhood HOA, everything came crashing down one unsuspecting Tuesday morning when I discovered a bright orange notice taped rudely to my front door. My heart started racing as I unfolded the crisp paper, disbelief washing over me. A $500 monthly fee increase? For what? Excessive vehicles parked on my own property. Just 3 vehicles, all perfectly reasonable. My work truck, indispensable for my construction business, my wife's SUV, critical for her demanding hospital shifts, and a modest used Honda we'd proudly gifted our daughter on her 16th birthday last month. How could this possibly be grounds for such an outrageous punishment? My gaze drifted to the street, catching sight of Karen Mitchell, our meticulous and overbearing HOA president, clipboard in one hand, smartphone snapping photos in the other. There she was again, inspecting driveways and yards as if we were prisoners under her surveillance. Curiosity bubbled within me. Why was Karen so fixated on my family? What had we ever done to attract such meticulous scrutiny? My wife, Sarah, peeked nervously through the living room curtains, whispering anxiously, "She's out there again. Should we just hide the Honda in the garage?" But no, I couldn't accept that humiliation. Why should we hide as if we'd done something wrong? Suddenly, I recalled the last HOA meeting, Karen's cold voice echoing in my memory. "Maybe if you can't afford proper garage storage, this neighborhood isn't for you." The audacity of her statement reignited my frustration and fueled my curiosity further. Was this really about vehicles, or was Karen's mission more sinister, driven by power and prejudice? Little did Karen know, beneath my quiet demeanor, I had a secret of my own, one I'd carefully hidden for years. The more she pushed, the more determined I became to reveal the truth, one that would rock the foundation of our entire community. But would Karen, with her ruthless control and endless rules, accept defeat gracefully? Or would she unleash even darker measures against us? My heart pounded with anticipation as I imagined the shock that would soon cross her face. Standing there with that orange notice clenched in my hand, I knew one thing for certain. Karen had made a critical mistake targeting my family. The real question, the one that kept my curiosity burning like wildfire, was simple yet thrilling. Just how far was she willing to go before discovering she'd chosen the wrong homeowner to bully? Karen Mitchell, our illustrious HOA president, was a special breed of neighborhood tyrant, armed with a sparkling pink clipboard and an insatiable appetite for control. Every morning she paraded through the streets, clipboard clutched like a sacred artifact, her eyes sharp, searching for the smallest infractions. God forbid your grass was a centimeter too tall or your roses too vibrant. She'd have a violation notice slapped onto your door before you could finish your morning coffee. Ironically, her own lawn seemed conveniently immune to the strict regulations she so zealously enforced. It was infuriatingly typical to watch Karen snap photos of my driveway with her expensive smartphone, as if our family vehicles were some illicit contraband in a suburban crime scene. 3 cars, Karen. 3 normal, everyday cars. But no, according to her twisted logic, our driveway was now an illegal parking lot. Yet somehow, her friend Susan's garish purple fence and Bob's Christmas decorations, lingering like festive ghosts until March, never received so much as a polite reprimand. The day she casually suggested at a community meeting that perhaps my family didn't belong in the neighborhood if we couldn't afford adequate garage storage was the final straw. The smugness in her voice as she feigned concern over property values made my blood boil. Who appointed her guardian of neighborhood aesthetics and morality anyway? It wasn't enough that she harassed elderly Mrs. Johnson for her roses being too vibrant, or fined Mr. Chen, the beloved high school teacher, for his car barely touching his own driveway line during a snowstorm. No, She had to invent new rules every day to satisfy her obsessive compulsion to control everyone and everything. Her most recent scheme involved photographing our driveway from multiple angles to present at a meeting, creating an absurd spectacle worthy of a criminal investigation, all while conveniently ignoring that my daughter's car was parked there because she was home from college for the weekend. The irony of Karen's little charade was almost laughable. Almost. But what Karen didn't realize, in her blindness of arrogance, was that her petty dictatorship was about to be exposed. She might think she was invincible behind her precious clipboard and designer heels, but every tyrant eventually meets their match. And this time, she had unwittingly chosen a battle she could not possibly win. Unbeknownst to Karen and the entire neighborhood, I had quietly begun orchestrating a strategy that would redefine our community's future forever. For 5 meticulous years, cloaked in discretion and driven by resolve, I methodically acquired properties in our subdivision. It was initially just an astute investment approach, executed under the radar through various LLCs to ensure secrecy. But as Karen's reign of tyranny intensified, transforming innocent neighbors into targets of her obsessive scrutiny, my motivation evolved into something far more meaningful, a carefully calculated act of defiance. Each day spent living beneath Karen's relentless dictatorship only reinforced my resolve. Every unjust fee, every photograph snapped secretly from behind those expensive designer sunglasses, and every snide remark in neighborhood meetings became fuel that propelled my determination. I had come to realize that the only way to restore justice and harmony in our community was to dismantle her power, not through impulsive anger, but with patience, preparation, and undeniable evidence. My desk soon transformed into a strategic command center covered in precisely highlighted property maps, carefully cataloged legal documentation, and handwritten notes capturing every instance of Karen's blatant abuses of power. Each house I quietly bought symbolized another strategic move in a high-stakes chess game against the most ruthless HOA president our community had ever encountered. Watching Karen parade down our streets each morning, wielding her infamous pink clipboard like a weapon of suburban warfare, only deepened my determination. Her obliviousness to my plan filled me with a quiet satisfaction. She had no idea the power dynamics of the neighborhood were shifting dramatically beneath her very feet. The day I finally received the decisive text from my attorney, confirming I now owned 67% of the homes within the HOA, my heart leapt with anticipation and triumph. This was it. The pivotal moment, the point of no return, the carefully cultivated opportunity to turn Karen's entire oppressive system on its head. With this significant majority stake, I held the authority to fundamentally alter the structure and leadership of the HOA, effectively ending Karen's reign of terror once and for all. I vividly imagined the shock that would ripple through Karen's meticulously maintained facade when she realized who truly held the power. Would her arrogant confidence collapse under the weight of reality, or would she escalate her tactics, desperately clinging to control? Either way, the stage was set for an explosive revelation, one that would reverberate throughout the neighborhood, providing overdue justice to everyone Karen had victimized. As I prepared to confront Karen publicly, a strange sense of calm determination replaced my earlier anger. This was more than revenge. This was about reclaiming dignity, fairness, and community values that Karen had systematically trampled on. My silent strategy had reached its crucial turning point, a pivotal juncture promising to rewrite the narrative of our entire neighborhood. Karen, so blinded by her arrogance, was about to discover the true cost of her actions, a cost she could have never imagined. And a moment she would never forget. The clock ticked ominously toward 7, as I stepped into the community center's meeting room, a place that felt more like a battlefield tonight than a gathering spot for neighbors. Immediately, an unsettling tension gripped the room. Thicker than the stale air itself, familiar faces crowded the rows of folding chairs, expressions etched with anxiety, suspicion, and curiosity. Clearly, Karen had done her homework, carefully orchestrating this emergency meeting at the most inconvenient time, knowing fully well that busy families would struggle to attend. Yet, to her surprise, the room was packed. It seemed everyone had reached their breaking point. At the front, beneath glaring fluorescent lights, Karen stood rigid behind the podium, clutching her sparkly pink gavel like a weapon. Her voice oozed with self-righteousness as she began clicking through her meticulously prepared PowerPoint slides, each filled with exaggerated images of my driveway. She presented these photos as if she were unveiling evidence of a federal crime, dramatically pausing after each click to let murmurs ripple through her loyal followers. My daughter's simple Honda suddenly looked suspiciously like a centerpiece in Karen's twisted narrative of neighborhood chaos. It was absurd, laughable even, except no one was laughing. My blood simmered beneath my carefully maintained composure as Karen paraded her carefully curated allegations. She shamelessly accused our family's 3 vehicles of causing snowdrifts, declining property values, and somehow community unrest. The hypocrisy of it all burned brighter with every passing moment. Just a row away, Bob, Karen's husband, smugly handed out copies of a new draconian bylaw proposal, restricting each household to 2 vehicles and requiring mandatory garage parking. The unfairness was suffocating, the double standards blatant. I saw Mrs. Rodriguez roll her weary eyes in disbelief, and Mr. Chen furiously scribbling notes, each recalling their own humiliating brushes with Karen's tyranny. But Karen was just warming up. With a theatrical flourish, she pulled out a thick binder, shamelessly admitting to months of invasive surveillance, tracking my family's daily movements. Gasps erupted, the audience shifting uncomfortably. Even her staunch supporters seemed suddenly unsure, disturbed by the invasive nature of Karen's obsession. The entire room had begun whispering in shock when Sarah Jenkins, my neighbor, courageously stood to challenge Karen's blatant absurdity. Karen snapped immediately, dismissively silencing Sarah with a ruthless glare and a sharply raised voice. Her mask of composure was starting to slip, revealing the vindictive authoritarian lurking beneath her polished exterior. As Karen hurriedly called for a vote without discussion, I knew my moment had arrived. Rising slowly, deliberately from my chair, I straightened my tie and projected calm authority. This was the turning point I'd been waiting 5 patient years to unleash. Karen shot me a venomous glance, barking sharply that I wasn't recognized. I couldn't help but relish the flicker of panic crossing her eyes when I calmly cited HOA bylaw section 7.3, clearly allowing any property owner to challenge voting procedures. The air thickened instantly. Whispers turned into stunned silence. Her grip tightened visibly on the podium, knuckles white, betraying the anxiety she desperately wanted to hide. Confidently, I approached the front, carrying with me not anger, but a carefully prepared arsenal. Years of meticulous planning, evidence, and secret ownership documents. The quiet sound of my footsteps across the linoleum floor seemed deafening in the tension-filled silence. Karen's confident facade cracked further with each measured step. Pulling out the property map from my folder, I unfolded it slowly, deliberately letting the implications of what was about to unfold hang in the air. Karen's eyes widened, color rapidly draining from her carefully powdered cheeks. "Before any vote," I declared, my voice clear, steady, echoing in the shocked stillness. "Perhaps the community should see who exactly controls this HOA." Gasps ricocheted across the room, as I calmly revealed my ownership of 67% of neighborhood properties, detailing every step of my quiet yet powerful resistance. Karen visibly staggered, her designer heels suddenly unstable beneath her, the sparkling gavel slipping from her grasp and crashing dramatically onto the floor. The room erupted into chaos. Neighbors began recording frantically on their phones. Whispers became shouts. Karen, frantically whispering with Bob, desperately attempted to regain control, but the tide had irreversibly shifted. Finally cornered, her smug confidence evaporated into fear-driven outrage, her voice turning high-pitched and frantic as she accused me of manipulation. But it was too late. The community had seen the truth behind her glittering facade. The calculated hypocrisy, obsessive surveillance, and discriminatory enforcement. As I laid down thick stacks of property deeds onto the table, the symbol of my long-term strategy finally revealed, Karen recoiled, her authority vanishing like smoke. This meeting, originally planned as her grand finale of control, had become her spectacular downfall. In a moment of profound poetic justice, Karen's power was irretrievably shattered, her reign finally ending not with applause, but in stunned silence. Tonight was more than a victory. It was a revolution, ignited in a small suburban meeting room. And Karen, our once fearsome self-appointed dictator, could only watch in helpless disbelief as her meticulously constructed kingdom of petty control crumbled beneath her feet. The courtroom was charged with tension, every breath held as the judge leaned forward, scrutinizing the overwhelming evidence against Karen Mitchell. Her carefully constructed facade of power was crumbling before everyone's eyes, piece by devastating piece. Karen sat rigid, gripping the edge of the mahogany table, knuckles white as each secret was painfully unveiled. Her designer pearls trembled slightly around her neck, no longer symbols of authority, but fragile props of a desperate woman cornered by her own corruption. As my lawyer confidently presented footage, Karen's image filled the screen, caught red-handed measuring my grass at 3 a.m, like a villain lurking in shadows. Audible gasps echoed across the courtroom, but worse still, emails surfaced, revealing her brazen contempt for the community she claimed to serve. Her voice, arrogant and unmistakably venomous, resonated clearly through audio recordings as she mocked elderly residents struggling to pay fines that funded her luxurious Hawaiian vacations. With every word, the disgusted murmurs intensified, condemning her duplicity. Karen's attorney frantically shuffled papers, sweat glistening on his forehead, desperately objecting as former HOA board members took the stand, painting Karen as a relentless bully who manipulated rules for personal gain. The courtroom stilled completely when one former ally admitted, in a voice shaking with guilt, that Karen had openly bragged about weaponizing HOA violations to drive out undesirable neighbors. Karen's eyes darted around wildly, searching for allies that no longer existed, isolated by her own arrogance. In a final, devastating blow, my lawyer placed a stack of financial documents before the judge, proof undeniable that Karen diverted HOA funds for her personal backyard renovation. The judge's gavel struck sharply, sealing her fate. Karen jolted, eyes wide with panic and disbelief as her meticulously crafted empire of fear imploded in a single, decisive moment. Her power evaporated, leaving her exposed and vulnerable before the very community she had relentlessly oppressed. Outside the courthouse, a fleet of news vans waited eagerly. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, capturing every detail of her spectacular collapse. Karen stumbled away, dignity shattered, as neighbors openly celebrated justice finally delivered. Her threats of revenge dissolved into empty echoes, mere whispers against the wave of change sweeping our community. Karen Mitchell, the once formidable tyrant wielding her pink clipboard, was now nothing more than a cautionary tale, of pride, corruption, and ultimate downfall. The morning following Karen's courtroom humiliation began with an onslaught of chaos. A swarm of media vans descended upon our peaceful street, their glaring cameras and intrusive questions transforming our quiet neighborhood into a spectacle. Karen had strategically unleashed the press, weaponizing public opinion in a desperate, spiteful bid for redemption. I watched bitterly from behind my curtains, feeling powerless as sensationalized news headlines twisted our community's painful struggle into a cheap melodrama, exploiting the scandal rather than confronting the real injustice. My phone buzzed relentlessly, angry, fearful neighbors begging for clarity amid the media firestorm Karen had deliberately ignited. Her loyalists, unwilling or unable to acknowledge her blatant wrongdoing, flooded social media with misinformation, painting me as some ruthless tycoon plotting to destroy the fabric of suburban tranquility. It was infuriatingly absurd. No matter how much evidence I provided, no matter how irrefutable my claims, the narrative spun wildly beyond control, turning truth into mere fodder for online outrage. Even more exasperating was Karen herself, boldly conducting interviews as if she were a victim, rather than the perpetrator of years of systematic harassment. She shed crocodile tears on camera, dramatically lamenting about her noble intentions of upholding neighborhood standards. Each carefully rehearsed sob infuriated me further, yet confronting her theatrics felt futile. Every rebuttal only amplified her martyrdom in the eyes of a manipulated public. In the courtroom, despite Karen's legal defeat, the relentless coverage and swirling falsehoods left a bitter taste of injustice lingering in the air. My lawyer tirelessly issued statements correcting blatant fabrications, but the damage had already been done. Truth, it seemed, was overshadowed by the spectacle Karen masterfully orchestrated, reducing years of careful planning and genuine reform into a shallow circus. Frustration simmered beneath every forced smile I offered to neighbors caught in confusion. Anger burned with every distorted headline I read. Powerless against the raging tide of misinformation Karen had ignited. The reality stung bitterly clear. Although legally victorious, I was trapped in a battle I couldn't decisively win. A war of perception manipulated expertly by a woman desperate to salvage her ruined reputation. Karen's legal downfall had been decisive, but the exhausting battle against misinformation, media spectacle, and relentless bitterness proved far more insidious, a stark reminder that sometimes even the strongest evidence could fail to silence a cunning, vengeful voice. With Karen's departure, a new chapter opened for our neighborhood, one filled with optimism, collaboration, and genuine community spirit. Almost immediately, a fresh energy swept through our streets, transforming quiet tension into vibrant conversations as neighbors eagerly gathered together to rebuild what had been lost. The days of fear-driven rule enforcement vanished like a distant nightmare, replaced by cheerful meetings where everyone felt welcomed and heard. Community events soon flourished, laughter echoing freely from backyard barbecues, kids playing basketball openly in driveways, and gardens blooming without fear of measuring tapes or fines. One of our first acts as the newly reorganized HOA was establishing a community garden right where Karen once stalked her victims, clipboard in hand. Watching neighbors of all ages planting vegetables, tending flowers, and sharing gardening tips became a symbol of our collective healing and renewal. Even Mrs. Johnson, now happily tending vibrant roses without worry, joked joyfully that her flowers could finally grow as loudly as they pleased. Each day in the garden served as a reminder that our neighborhood thrived best when cultivated with kindness and mutual respect, rather than ruled by fear and suspicion. Meanwhile, the new HOA board reflected the diversity and inclusivity we'd long dreamed of, proudly electing representatives like Mrs. Rodriguez, whose authentic recipes had once been unfairly labeled too exotic, and Mr. Chen, whose colorful garden now inspired rather than incurred fines. Together, we turned previously misused HOA funds toward meaningful improvements, revitalizing playgrounds, repairing long-neglected community pools, and establishing volunteer programs to support our elderly residents. The spirit of generosity spread quickly, creating bonds stronger than ever before. Within weeks, tangible proof of our progress appeared in rising property values, validating our belief that a community built on respect rather than rigid conformity was truly appealing to everyone. Even those previously hesitant neighbors joined in, admitting openly how refreshing it felt to live without fear of arbitrary fines or selective enforcement. When we installed our welcoming neighborhood sign, reading, "Welcome to Thompson Hills, where good neighbors make good neighborhoods," it was met with enthusiastic applause, marking a new era of openness, pride, and joy. Our community had transformed dramatically, and for the better. Karen's reign was a fading memory, replaced by shared smiles, supportive friendships, and a renewed sense of belonging. It was clear now, the best neighborhoods aren't policed into perfection, but nurtured lovingly into vibrant, thriving communities. As the sun set gently over our newly revitalized neighborhood, I found myself reflecting deeply on the lessons our community had learned, lessons that hold true far beyond our quiet streets, resonating profoundly through all stages of life. Perhaps most essential among them is understanding the true meaning of strength. It's not found in wielding power or enforcing rigid rules, but in nurturing kindness, respect, and genuine care for one another. Through our experiences with Karen, we learned that authority built on fear is brittle and temporary, whereas compassion and empathy create lasting bonds, bringing people closer together even in challenging times. For many of us, especially in our later years, the instinct to avoid conflict or remain silent in the face of injustice often feels safer. Yet this chapter taught us the immense value and necessity of standing courageously for fairness, no matter one's age or background. Change, as we discovered, rarely happens overnight. It requires patience, wisdom, and thoughtful planning. Our collective victory was a reminder that quiet strength, steady resolve, and strategic action often achieve far more lasting results than anger or impulsivity ever could. Moreover, our journey illuminated the vital importance of community. In retirement years, as family and social circles evolve, the bonds forged with neighbors become increasingly significant. Relationships, we realized, aren't simply pleasant additions to our lives. They are lifelines offering mutual support, comfort, and joy. By standing united, caring for our vulnerable neighbors, and prioritizing the greater good over individual pride or prejudice, we created a neighborhood where respect thrived and everyone felt valued. This sense of purpose and belonging not only enhanced our community, it rejuvenated our spirits, reminding us of our shared humanity. Another powerful lesson is that forgiveness and reconciliation play essential roles in true community healing. After Karen's downfall, it would have been easy to cling to resentment. Yet, as time passed, we collectively recognized the healing power of moving forward without bitterness, understanding that the true measure of a community lies not in its past conflicts, but in its ability to rebuild bridges and mend relationships. We learned to let go of lingering grievances and focus instead on embracing opportunities to grow stronger together. Ultimately, our experience underscored one simple, timeless truth. Everyone deserves dignity, fairness, and respect. It's a lesson that transcends age, resonating profoundly as we navigate the later chapters of our lives. As seniors, we've seen firsthand how life's most meaningful moments come from small acts of kindness, genuine connections, and the courage to stand against injustice. Our legacy, we realized, isn't defined by authority or rigid rules, but by how compassionately we treat those around us, and how we choose to respond when faced with adversity. So, as we pass along our story to younger generations, our hope is not simply to entertain, but to inspire reflection on what truly matters. Communities, and indeed our lives, flourish best when guided by empathy, fairness, and humility. We may have retired from our careers, but never from our responsibility to teach by example, ensuring the values of respect, kindness, and integrity continue to enrich lives long after our own story has been told.